Hey there, logheads, welcome back to the backlog. Hey, wait, what's that? Oh shit, it's the spoiler alarm.
Attention! Attention! Spoiler alert! Spoiler alert! The crowds are dropping spoilers all over. Get to cover, sonny.
Fucking shoot me. Okay, now that that's mercifully not happening anymore, let me just ask, am I allowed to talk about COVID yet? It was really weird at the start of the pandemic when all of the YouTubers, weren't allowed to say COVID on here, right? I mean, I'm not imagining that. It was like it was a dirty word, but, fuck it, my videos aren't monetized, I'm not afraid of anything. Least of all the phonies and the posers at YouTube who want to harsh my righteous vibes. The early pandemic was, to put it academically, a tremendously shitty time. It was lonely, isolating, and I think that maybe the worst thing about it was that the loneliness never really went away. I don't know about you folks, you little people who live in my phone, but the world, to me, hasn't had the same texture since COVID became a thing. Without being too much of a downer, it's felt like an increasingly bleak and lonely place in the last half-decade. For many people, myself very much included, video games have become a refuge from the socio-economic climate of the last few years. When all of this started in 2020, I put a normal and reasonable amount of time, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours, into Animal Crossing. I also found two games that would both help me process the loneliness that I'd been feeling since lockdown in different ways. Death Stranding and Outer Wilds. Now these are very different games, from gameplay to narrative to theme to music to tone, but because I'm a video essayist, I'm going to draw some tenuous parallels between them for your amusement and titillation. What Death Stranding and Outer Wilds have in common is that they both instill a profound sense of loneliness in the player at times, and at the start of the pandemic that hit close to home. So this video is going to be about that. It's going to be about the ways that these games made me feel about the pandemic, about the difficult times that we find ourselves in, and about what it is to be just a little person in a big, scary world. Much ink has been spilled about Death Stranding's frankly uncanny timing, arriving as it did just months before the identification of the coronavirus! It's a game that's about reuniting a country fractured by a disaster that's so wide-reaching as to be incomprehensible. The physical landscape of Death Stranding's America is changed and unrecognisable, its past washed away by what's called timefall. If you've not played it, timefall is sort of like rain, but also sort of like time, man. Hideo Kojima is the world's greatest living philosopher. America in Death Stranding has become, in every way, a land out of time. It's isolated and cut off from the country as we know it today. Obviously it's tremendously physically altered, given that it's Iceland now, but culturally too, our present feels like a distant memory to the world of Death Stranding. Except Washington. I think Washington has pretty much always been like that. America's social landscape has suffered a similar sundering, with human settlements fractured and fragile, but not that fragile, left alone to stand against the wilderness. Survivors in Death Stranding are even reliant on deliveries of antidepressants to stay afloat, because the isolation has led to rampant mental health issues. Like I said, eerie, timely shit. Playing as Sam Porter Bridges, a man removed from family, bereft of friends and denied a regular life, a guy who literally carries his work on his back, that suddenly became uncomfortably familiar for me during prolonged lockdowns where my office became any place that I could cart a laptop and set up shop. Escaping from lockdowns and quarantines to a place where my main concern was travelling around and connecting people felt right, cathartic, satisfying maybe. It certainly hit close to home. Sam's ultimate mission is not only to reconnect Americans to each other for their own well-being, but also to prevent a final apocalyptic event from severing humanity's connections forever. This is how Death Stranding as a text understands loneliness. It's a problem to be solved through reconnection, through determination and elbow grease and grit. Loneliness is as much the enemy in Death Stranding as Higgs and his terrorist cell, the Homo Demons. I can't. Loneliness is as much the enemy in Death Stranding as Higgs and his gay demons, a dragon for Sam to slay. Aside from the general themes of isolation and loneliness, being personally alone is the name of the game in Death Stranding. It's the source of much of the game's difficulty and tension. As Sam, you're gonna trek from coast to coast and back again all by yourself. Every wet slope or slick, slippery riverbank is your enemy, just waiting to trip you up and send you and your precious cargo careening all the way back down that fucking mountain you just spent 15 goddamn minutes climbing. Being alone in Death Stranding is being in danger. It's being at war with the terrain. Other players' infrastructure, their ladders, their roads, as well as their dropped cargo, all pepper the bleak landscape, but you'll seldom meet another soul. This tenuous sense of connection to other players is powerful in its frailty though. Fleeing a group of enemies across a bridge that someone else has built feels truly special, like a friend you'll never meet has thrown you a lifeline. In the same way, Death Stranding the game gave me hope during the pandemic. Hope that it might eventually come to an end, that ultimate disaster could be averted, and that the before times might live again. Death Stranding itself was a lifeline for me, and for that reason, I've decided to dub it the first Strand type game. A term which is laden with meaning and is definitely not some shit that someone made up. Death Stranding was, in a very real way, escapist fiction. It let me put a broken world back to rights. As Sam, I was able to face down calamity to reach the very brink, and then through my own hard work and grit, pull back from despair's event horizon. In a real world that started to feel frighteningly out of my control, this was a welcome feeling. In Outer Wilds, everyone you know dies. Every single living thing that you meet perishes in the heat death of the universe, and there's nothing you can do to stop it. Outer Wilds puts you in the shoes of a spacefaring little alien who's trapped in a time loop at the end of everything. The only thing you carry with you between loops is your knowledge and your sense of humour, and it's your job to end that loop and save the universe. Or so it seems at the outset. As it turns out, sometimes calamity is inevitable. The only way to eventually beat Outer Wilds, to finish the game and roll the credits, is to stop even looking for a way to avert the disaster. Quite the opposite really, you have to actively disengage the device that's keeping the universe in that 22-minute death throw and move forward through oblivion. You don't just peek into the void, you've got to leap headlong into the abyss. After all, maybe there's something beautiful on the other side. Sam's story about reuniting America and the importance of building networks is often pretty grim, funny names aside. It's about how, when people are thrown asunder by tragedy, they need to reunite or die. Without Sam's intervention, the world would literally end. I think this big man would eat it or something, and Death Stranding very clearly positions this as a bad thing. It would suck if Sam and all his friends ceased to be. Outer Wilds takes a slightly different perspective. Everything has to end, eventually. What we call the apocalypse is but a line in the grand story of everything. We all pale in comparison to the awesome scale of the cosmos, and we don't get to choose the circumstances that we're born into. Some of us are just gonna have the misfortune of waking up 22 minutes before the universe explodes, and have to make the best of the time that we get. Sometimes we can fight and fight and fight till our fists are bloody and we're on our knees at the end of the earth, and still fail. Everyone dies, even us. And that's okay. There's peace in accepting that, even. Where Death Stranding understands loneliness as a problem to be solved, Outer Wilds knows that it is the necessary counterweight to friendship and companionship. What would the value of companionship be if we didn't know solitude? Outer Wilds ends with a campfire, surrounded by the memories of all your friends. Chert and Rybeck and Gabbro and all the rest, we never saw them united before that moment at the end. They kept to themselves in their camps, scattered across the solar system, and you were by yourself for most of your adventure too. Seeing your fellow far-flung travellers reunited here at the end, huddled around the last light in the dark nothing of an empty cosmos, that felt profound to me. If I hadn't spent so much time wandering through lonely cave systems or lost in the vacuum of space by myself, would it have been as impactful? Being alone in Death Stranding feels like doing battle with the ground that you walk on, whereas in Outer Wilds, the terrain is just a puzzle to be figured out. It's a song to be learned. You can figure out gravity itself if you give it enough time. And in Outer Wilds, you have all the time in the world. Loneliness gives us something, and it's never permanent. Call me a cheeseball, but I love that Outer Wilds ends with this power of friendship flavoured thing. Nothing, not even the end of everything, can take companionship from us. It's the strongest thing that we have, and we carry that with us everywhere we go. The memory of it alone is powerful enough to build a new universe from. Anytime the feeling of loneliness started to get to me in Outer Wilds, I'd just stop for a second. I'd pull out my space radio, tune into Rybeck's frequency, and just listen to him noodling on his banjo for a while. Sometimes he'd be far away on the other side of the sun, but he'd be there with me too, as sure as though he were actually by my side. When I tripped and fell into a black hole, I found myself transported to the edge of the solar system. It was dark. All I could hear was my breathing. All I could see was the draining O2 meter in my hood. This void is the loneliest place in Outer Wilds, I think. So I turned on my radio again. I was far enough away from the rest of the solar system at that point that the other travellers, spread out across every planet, all came into focus at once. Their disparate instruments coalesced into a single, beautiful, harmonious song. I was as alone as it is possible to be in a video game, floating untethered in the blackness of space. But I'd never felt closer to the other characters, to my friends. The further away I was, the closer they seemed. Playing this during the pandemic, I couldn't help but feel that even though my friends and my family were all in isolation all over the country, maybe they weren't so far away either. Even now that there's no more lockdowns, I still feel that sense of closeness to them, no matter how far flung we might all be. Where Death Stranding offers a vision of a rebuilt world and understands humans as essential for saving it, Outer Wilds faces down the heat death of the universe calmly, with a smile. Sometimes there's nothing we can do to avert disaster. We are small in the face of eternity, and sometimes we can't fix things. At the end of it all, though, there's still love. Our friends are still with us, once scattered across the cosmos, but now sat together around a campfire. Not even the greatest forces in the universe can take that from you, and at the end, there's still music. So, there you have it, I guess. Death Stranding is a game about fixing loneliness and saving the world. Outer Wilds is about how the most insignificant little dude on the most insignificant little speck of space dust in the cosmos is both very alone and not at all. I feel as though I've maybe done a poor job up until this point at conveying the hope and the joy of Outer Wilds. Talking about death and nihilism and the end of the universe is grim, sure, but Outer Wilds presents it as profound, mysterious and awe-inspiring. A beginning as much as an end. It's not horrific, and the game doesn't revel in death or destruction. There's a bright flash of light, and that's it. Learning to let go of the universe and helping the universe let go of you is beautiful. You're rewarded with music and companionship for it. Your song and your memories of your friends are the bones of the next universe. Like I said earlier, you can fight and fight and fight and beat your fists bloody on the walls of circumstance. But there's value in knowing when to admit that the fight is too much for you alone. Both Death Stranding and Outer Wilds obviously have valuable and important things to say about being lonely, about companionship, and about how we should cope with catastrophe. Ultimately, I think I got a little bit more from Outer Wilds though. It made me feel at peace with all of the scary things happening in the world around me. As satisfying as it was to embody Sam the man, the fixer of problems, it was ultimately just escapism. It felt nice and comforting to put things to rights. It was fulfilling to overcome the environment and the social circumstances of a ruined America. And goddamn, but I really loved punching Troy Baker's smug face in at the end.
I wish you well. In hell!
But I always had to re-engage with the real world after I was done. Outer Wilds gave me something that I could take with me when I left it behind. In the face of climate change and fascism and bigotry and genocide, all I can do is my best. I can't turn all of these tides single-handedly. I am, after all, just a little person on a space rock. In a sea of games about fighting to save the world, it's important to recognise sometimes that's just not a possibility. Sometimes fighting against the void, fighting against entropy, will leave you running in place, reliving the same 22 minutes over and over again, putting yourself through hell in a battle that you can't hope to win as an individual. Outer Wilds says that what matters is that we connect with others, that we treasure those connections as the precious and powerful things that they are, and that we try our very best to enjoy the ride. Thanks for watching.